My name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, make sure, as always, to rate the program and give us a follow. Today's guest is the founder and managing director of Target P, a consultancy trusted by global leaders like Autoliv, MTR, Implania, and many more to operationalize resilience across risk, cost, and compliance. With over 20 years of experience in procurement and supply chain, both as an operator and advisor, today's guest brings some bold insights, a no-nonsense approach, and a real-world transformation wealth of stories. In this episode, he joins us to explore Europe's lag in procurement innovation, why SRM should be the system of record, and how to actually break down silos between risk, ESG, and costs. Some of the topics we will be covering with none other than Jan Theissen. Jan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a hell of an introduction. Thank you very much, Sam.
Well, I try to do my part to make our guests feel special. Do you feel seen, Jan?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I like to ask sometimes, how in the heck did you get into this world of procurement?
Yeah, that's a good question. Many years ago, I did an apprenticeship. And when I finished the apprenticeship, I actually wanted to go into controlling and finance. For whatever reason, they said, let's go to procurement, which I didn't like actually at that time. But then I started and I became addicted. And now I'm in that space for almost 28 years now. And I still love it. I'm still passionate about it. And I still like to help people also to grow into procurement or to develop procurement.
Now, I have to ask, what got you addicted to procurement then? What was it about the role?
Oh, it's pretty simple. I grew up in the countryside, and actually that was my gate to the world. So I really met new cultures, new people. I explored different languages, and suddenly, my little countryside existence became more global, and it really opened a lot of doors to me. And then there were always new topics. It was not only about people or negotiations. It was then about digitalization. It was about risk. It was about getting to new countries, exploring the world, not only on the phone, but also traveling to countries, meeting people. So it's always exciting. It's always new. It's not the standard 24/7 work that you do every day. There's always a good surprise every day. It's sometimes also, of course, a bad surprise, but it's never boring.
No, and I think that that's an exciting way to be able to look at the role as well. There's a lot of opportunities, and I've heard from many people that work within the space. The opportunities to be global truly in a role is one of the things that draws them to it. Now, you've worked both in the US and the EU. Can I ask, what do you think is the mindsets that you would import from the European mindset of procurement into the US, and then also vice versa?
Yeah, that's a question you always get asked, in particular when you come from Germany and work in the US. There are always these stereotypes like the Germans are very much into detail and they are very good at planning and they're very good in execution, and the Americans are fast and the Americans make quick decisions. Actually, that's somewhat true, and that's also what we really need to learn from each other. What you see in Germany is we overthink a lot of things, in particular in procurement. Instead of making a decision, instead of doing a test, instead of doing a proof of concept, we evaluate and evaluate again. And we are hesitant if it comes to make decisions or to experiment. And this is what we really need to learn also from the people in the US. They are way more like, hey, it's an 80% solution. Let's go with it. Let's improve it later on, but let's start. While sometimes in the US, it's probably too quick with a decision. Sometimes it's not really thought through in some areas. So a mix of both the European culture and the US culture would be fantastic. It would be really mind blowing if we could create people or systems like that. But overall, I must say, if it comes to procurement, we all have the same attitude. It's all about getting the best out of the deal. It's really make things happen. So that's probably between the societies, there's a bigger gap than between the procurement people on either side of the pond.
Interesting insights. Why do you think that the mindset in maybe EU procurement, but more particularly you talked about German and I assume maybe DACH region procurement, is a focus on, more detail-oriented risk aversion? Is there a particular reason why?
I think that has nothing to do with procurement. It's really the nature of the people, it's the culture, it's the way we think, the way we operate. I mean, it's not only in procurement, but in other things, we're just way slower than other areas. Just compare now Europe to China. We talk about regulations, we talk about how to put things on paper, and the Chinese just do it. And it's a little bit the same in the US. I think it's just part of our DNA, unfortunately. The other good part is when we start, I think the execution is much faster. The execution is much more successful than if you do just this task force approach, like, hey, let's go. I think there's good on both sides. But yeah, we have to adapt faster now in Europe. I mean, the world is going faster. The disruptions are getting more. The decisions that we need to take in supply chain require some kind of a speed, and we need to get better in adoption to that.
Interesting. There's a saying in sales processes, right? Sometimes you need to go slow to be able to go fast. And from what I'm hearing from you, it's also kind of the same as when you are setting up a strong foundation. Sometimes that can then put you in a position to be able to go fast later and be very efficient once your operations are up and running. Now, do you have concrete examples of where you've seen this particular outlook work in organizations that you've either been in or been an advisor to?
Yeah, I see that probably every week. The good thing is that we have global clients, and that makes us also, that puts us in a position to compare how they operate, let's say in the European regions, and how they operate outside Europe. We are currently working with a client on a digitalization approach for their procurement organization, and it's really interesting to watch now that we have started, let's say, the system evaluations. We put people into one room or one to virtual room, and we ask them, hey, help us evaluating this solution, and the responses were totally different. We had people from Brazil, and they said, wow, this solution is great, it looks good, the usability seems to be great. Then we asked the Germans, they said, it's way too colorful, it's way too shiny, it's not really down to earth. The Americans had a different opinion. But you also see, you're not only seeing that if you evaluate it, but also if you start with the execution. People, that was my experience in this project, but also in other projects. If it comes to China or, for instance, South America, people are way more passionate about trying out new technologies, implementing new technologies, and they are they are much more disciplined in using these technologies. While, let's say, the Americans, the Europeans often say, all right, give me some time, and if I have time, I will work with it. They are way more into that solution. They are way more disciplined to make the solution really a success. And this is something you really have to manage also if you are a digital expert. We are talking about change management projects. We're talking about making it happen, and making it happen does not necessarily mean that master data needs to be 100% correct. It's really about making people work with it and helping people to bridge the gap.
Yeah. And I think that we see this very often, right? It's kind of this paralysis by analysis. Like you said, the data needs to be 100%. Whereas, for example, certain cultures will be able to accept 80% good and that 20% as a place to iterate and improve. I don't think I've ever heard somebody comment about the way that a German procurement team commented about technology in a more German way than saying that something was too colorful. That is a very German outlook of a criticism of a technology. And I love it. So
at the end of the day, it's all about usability. And I'm in the digital procurement space now for 25 years. And in the early 2000s, we made decisions based on price and the number of functionalities. That was how we made decisions. Now it's way more about having the users giving a feedback, listen to the users, thinking about the interface, the user interface. It's all about usability these days.
Right.
Then you're getting feedback like that. It's not about function anymore. It's more about the appearance, the looks, and such.
Do you think that we're transitioning into a more grassroots way of buying technology? Because I think that the traditional sense is, of course, you get into the CIO, CTO, office, and of course, there's top-down decisions that are made. Big, large infrastructure projects that happen. Do you think that there's more of a groundswell mode of operating with buying technology that's coming into this kind of next era of tech purchasing in procurement?
It needs to be. I mean, the only department or the only group of people who can say what they need is the functional area. It's procurement. I mean, if it's a top-down approach, and I've seen that many times in the past, where the IT department bought whatever SAP setups, and they got buy this, you will get that for free, and then suddenly the functional area had to work with it. That doesn't work at all. I've seen a lot of IT projects failing because of this top-down approach. So if we want to be successful in procurement, we need to have people, and we need to have skilled people in our organization that are able to say, this is what we need, this is how we can improve, this is how we can increase our value contribution, this is how probably a system or tool architecture should look like. And with that, you go to IT and then probably discuss on eye-to-eye level to make it happen. But if you do either top down or just bottom up, you will fail.
It's a great insight, and I think that's we see it ourselves, right? Users are hungry for more than ever before, right? There's this kind of I would say this expectation on technology to be able to have that same ease of use and sleek capabilities that we have in our personal applications and our professional applications. So that top-down decision making doesn't always work anymore either, because then the adoption's not going to be there. But you hit on something that I wanted to dig into, because I know that you guys practice tech agnosticism within your approach as a advisor, which is the right approach, right? And you said in some of the prep work that not everybody needs an SAP or an Oracle, right? But sometimes you need to be able to integrate into those solutions. I'm just curious to your point of that. Not everybody sometimes needs those types of solutions. Sometimes people need a solution that works for them, right?
Right.
What do you think is one of the biggest mistakes that people make in their tech selection? And then also, what do you think that procurement teams are getting right? So the other side of that coin.
Well, first of all, to be realistic, there's always an Oracle or an SAP already implemented, or Microsoft Dynamics or whatever, because every company needs to have an ERP. In particular, if you work in the manufacturing environment, there's always some kind of an ERP system in the background. The question is how to deal with it. And that also depends, of course, on the industry, on the complexity of your procurement operations. But in general, I'm in favor of more of a best of breed landscape than really executing everything with the current ERP system. The reason for that is pretty obvious. If you really want to be good in strategic procurement, if you want to really be good in procure to pay, there are probably solutions out there on the market that can do it much better than Oracle or an SAP, for instance. And in particular, if you are in the manufacturing industry, and if you see, let's take the automotive space these days. Everyone has add-ons to their current ERP systems to either manage suppliers, to manage the strategic sourcing process, or to manage risk and ESG. You really have to build an ecosystem these days. So the days where you have just one system in place and that will do everything for you, that's the way I grew up in the late 90s. So we had SAP, or we had an ERP system, and that was more or less the Holy Bible. Then in the early 2000s, it started to shift a little bit. And these days, and we started a project last week with a large automotive company. And it was very obvious, discussing with the people in charge, the buyers, the category managers, the CPO, that whenever we want to get better as an organization, we need to think outside the ERP box, and we probably need to build our own ecosystem. And we might end up with 4 or 5 different solutions that we need to puzzle together into one ecosystem. But by the end of the day, that's way more budget friendly. It's way more speedy than if you really go with the big tankers.
How do you see companies best puzzling together? Because I think that, we recognize ourselves as a vendor that is fulfilling one particular area of the broader source to pay process. Obviously, our solution has to play nice with other ERPs or, source to contract or purchase to pay or even source to pay solutions, right? So, how do you see these teams working to piece them together? Are teams good at piecing them together? Do they struggle with it? Just curious on your take there.
Let's say the procurement teams are way more open to it because they understand what they need and they understand that there are best solutions out there, best fit solutions out there that really could deliver value to their daily operations. When it comes to the IT teams, it's getting a bit more difficult because they, of course, prefer a very simple approach, probably everything into one system. And then suddenly if they see, we need interfaces, we need to puzzle this together. This is probably additional work for the IT team. So they are a bit more skeptical and hesitant sometimes, but and it takes a bit more time to explain. But what I also see, and this is a little bit my criticism to the solution providers out there, we all know that we are living in a plug and play era. We all know that we need to work more best of breed. But then you see a lot of these digital solution providers, startup companies, or more mature organizations that still are not good in opening their doors, connecting to other systems. They work also very isolated instead of building let's say alliances, that if I'm a supplier for supply chain risk, for supplier management, why not teaming up with someone in the strategic sourcing area or with someone on the risk side? There are certain partnerships, of course, but in general, also the solution market is still way too much living in silos, and and so we have to overcome basically 3 hurdles: procurement, IT, and the solution providers to be really successful.
Interesting. I like that. I like that approach as well. And I think that, as a solution provider, we also recognize the requirements of that to be able to help the whole market move forward, right? And like you said, when it's all said and done, it's about the end user getting value, which is what every solution provider wants, which is that procurement gets the tooling they need to be able to do the job at hand. Now, you have talked about in your approach that you guys see SRM, which is a space that we're in ourselves, as an opportunity to be kind of the core, a nucleus in certain aspects, a spider in the web. So what is it that's made you kind of come about that particular approach? And is there anything that you've worked on that's stuck in the projects that you've worked on?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's always about value contribution. If you, as a procurement organization, you need to understand where I am, how can I increase value, and what do I need to do with to achieve it. For some organizations, probably strategic sourcing might be the core of their operations. For others, might be risk or ESG management. But in general, my experience tells me that in most organizations, still managing the supplier networks, managing suppliers is still something like a stepchild. And then they start to build and form new organizations. And suddenly we have a powerful, let's say, category-based organization, but we still do not understand our supply base. We don't know where we source, why we source. We don't know how fragile our supply chains are. And that was actually a discussion we had last week also with our client. And we had 2 parties in the room. One party was saying, hey, we need to focus more on strategic sourcing. We need to get better in the way we do RFIs, RFQs, RFPs. The other part of the group said, yeah, but first of all, let's understand where we source. Are our suppliers capable? Are our supply chains stable or robust? And more or less the decision was, let's go with supplier management, supplier relationship management first. Let's make sure that we understand our sourcing market. Let's make sure that these days we are somewhat safe if it comes to supply chain disruptions. Make sure that we are compliant with all the new guidelines, rules coming from the different countries, from the European Union. So the let's say the expectations on supplier network management is much higher than it was 5 or 10 years ago. So that's also the reason why lots of organizations now these days start with managing suppliers, and then in the second step they go with things like strategic sourcing or whatever.
Well, and I think that you make a point there, right? Is that if you're going to be able to create agility and resilience, you need to focus on the network that exists and fix that before, of course, you start focusing on how do we be able to source smarter, right? So it makes total sense to me, but I also understand the dichotomy in an organization as well. Very interesting that you guys are having those conversations. When you're looking at the market, or like you're supporting your organizations that you're advising to look at the market, right? Because I assume that you guys get brought in as kind of a digital solution advisor in a lot of cases.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What earns your trust in a solution? And on the other side of that, what's a red flag?
Yeah, what earns my trust? First of all, that people who provide a solution also understand something about procurement operations. I've seen lots of new startups.
That's a pretty low bar, Jan.
It is. No, it's not. It's actually, I've seen quite a few solutions coming to the market in the past few years, where people probably have been told at university or at some kind of an entrepreneurial class, hey, do something with procurement. There are some stupid people that never spent money in 25 years. So it's a field where you can make big money. And you talk to people and you feel they never talk to procurement people. They never understood the pain points, the job procurement has to do. So what seems to be a low bar for you is still a pretty high bar. The second thing is that when you start to sell a solution or provide a solution, a digital solution, a tool, understand that there are a lot of customers that probably don't even know how to build their risk management or how to build their supplier. What does it mean to operate a supplier management approach? So this is what I would expect also from a digital solution provider, that they bring at least some guidance, some knowledge in that area they selling, and not just selling a product that they want to scale and then sell for 20 million 5 years later. And this is the second bar. And this is usually where a lot of organizations fail, because they are just interested in selling their solution without providing some guidance to the customer.
And then the adoption doesn't stick, right? And that's the issue, because they're focused on the provider is focused on the product, not the partnership. Right. So I hear you. Sorry,
it needs to be a cultural fit. It needs, and that's really important. I mean, we always neglected that the past years, including myself, when I did the first project in the early 2000s, it was all about functions and cost and speed of implementation. But at the end of the day, if you work with a supplier, you need to establish a relationship, and it needs to be a cultural fit between the organization. It doesn't make sense if people don't get along well. It doesn't make sense if, let's say, the solution provider is all about profitability, while the family-owned customer is more about long-term relationships, long-term success. And this is what we do when we advise our clients, and we do system evaluations. We really teach the people about watch the others, ask questions to understand what is their long-term strategy, what is their plan with the organization, how do they interact with you, are they just here to sell stuff, or are they here to help you to get better? So this cultural fit is really a critical success factor these days, because the solutions, don't get me wrong, but most of the solutions are really comparable. If you go with A, B, or C, the pain is the same, the successes are the same, but at the end of the day, it's again about people and culture.
So how does a solution provider distinguish themselves in their people?
That's a good question.
Don't give away all of the good tips to our competitors now that are listening.
No. Most of the solution providers don't even care. To be very frank, it's not really that they come up with proposals how to make things happen. It's still difficult to convince them to help with implementation above and beyond technical questions or technical jobs. I think the customers, which means organizations that buy digital solutions, they have that way more on the radar than the digital solution providers. So I still see, sorry for the term, but I still see a lot of nerds that have technical expertise, that have a clue about what they're selling, but they're not really listening to customers, asking questions, and then trying to establish some kind of a conversation. And this is what I'm still missing.
I think that I think that what you're also probably experiencing, of course, is solution providers that are focused on, as we talk about internally, clicks rather than concepts. Do you understand the way that the business ticks, or are you just understanding the features that you have in your product, right? Can you be able to make them hold it and experience that particular solution because you're able to sit yourself in their seat, right? When you're demonstrating, are you just showing your platform, or are you playing the role of a commodity or category manager, right? I think that there's some of these things that we talk a lot about within our sales organization that I think are pretty foundational as well to the way that not only you sell but also implement technology as well, right? It's essential because it goes back to that thing that you were talking about before, change management. The one thing that we have to respect is that this might be the first and maybe even the only time that this particular business is buying this particular technology, right? And I think that that's something that not only the business needs to maybe be a bit transparent and open and vulnerable with themselves, but also the mindset of a vendor like ourselves or anyone in the procure tech space needs to also kind of be a bit knowing of, right? We all need to be abreast of that information pretty much.
Absolutely right.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about something that we touched upon, on the item of ESG and sustainability, because we talked about it in some of the pre work to the episode today. You talk about it as the triangle, right? The kind of trinity, the risk, cost, and ESG element to procurement. Now, how do you feel like big organizations are really focusing on balancing these things out?
Yeah, that's indeed still pretty difficult. I mean, let's face it, we are in the year 2025. We have some tough years behind us. We had a lot of supply chain disruptions. We had a big pandemic. I think that was all pretty new to all of us. I mean, I've never seen that in my earlier days in procurement. But now these days, it's all about cost. I mean, the supply chains are more or less stable now for a couple of months. But now lots of organizations face cost problems. They need to work on cost reduction projects. So I talked to 25 CPOs end of 2024, and basically they all told me, oh, wait, it will be a difficult year. We don't have budget for digital projects. We don't have budget for consultants. Our number one goal for 2025 will be cost reduction, cost containment, cost avoidance. And actually, that's also what we see on the market. Most of the RFQs that we're getting, most of the calls we're getting are somewhat around cost optimization, which is great for us because we do cost engineering projects anyway. We do cost analytics and things like that. However, you see a trend. And the other trend, of course, is sustainability. There are still legal obligations coming from the European Union or from the local or regional governments, and our goal must be now how to balance it. Because if I want to do risk management, I need to do cost management as well, because you have cost risk. If you do cost management, you need to do risk management, because if you don't manage your supply chain, it's a cost risk. And the same is with legal obligations, with sustainability. Yeah. If you're not really following up on legal requirements, you probably get penalized by whatever government. And this also will then have a direct impact on your P&L. So our job in procurement is really to balance out these triangle. What I see, unfortunately, is that we still focus mainly on one topic. It's either risk, it's either cost. And to be frank, sustainability, now that at least in Central Europe, now that the European Union was, let's say, has reduced the pressure on the legislation, I wouldn't say that sustainability did fall off the table, but it has lost a little bit the pressure that it has the past few years. So
I hear what you're saying, and I think that we're seeing it as well within the market. It's interesting because it's almost like, procurement gets myopic, or at least, when a priority pops up of the three within that kind of triangle of priorities, the rest of them kind of go to the side. But it might be because in the sense that you put it very, very, I think very simply, there is an interconnectivity and dependency between these things, but some other organizations might actually see that there is contradictory elements between them. Right? I can't focus on cost I can't focus on risk management if I'm focusing on cost savings. That has to be where I put all my time. Cost saving, ESG and sustainability can be able to wait because that's not going to be able to create savings. Right? I think that these are some of the things that we come across, and I assume maybe you're experiencing as well within the customers that you're working with. What I am curious about is like, do you think that the ESG and sustainability push within procurement, sourcing, and supply chain is really primarily only something that was driven because of legislation, or do you think that this is something that's now woven into the DNA of procurement?
It needs to be in the DNA of procurement. Is it already in the DNA of most of the procurement organizations? I don't think so. And at the end of the day, it's not about legal requirements. Of course, there are legal requirements, but at the end of the day, it's about humans. I mean, it's our planet. It's where we live. So we need to be clever enough to protect where we live. So by the end of the day, there's some pressure from not only from the government, there's pressure also from NGOs, there's pressure from the customers, there's pressure from the society. So because of that, it will not go away, even if the EU or the countries decide that they will downgrade regulations. At the end of the day, the society will always add some pressure on the organizations. And if you are in the consumer business, this pressure is probably even higher because you have a brand, you're selling to the final customer. If you are in the B2B space, let's say you are a typical tier 1 or tier 2 supplier, you will feel the pressure as well. It might be a little bit less because you're in the B2B space. But what I'm saying is that I would say in a few years, it will be very common to have, even in smaller companies, legal people or sustainability people in your procurement organizations, even if they don't deliver savings, even if they don't negotiate with suppliers or whatever. We will see new functions in procurement to make sure that we cover the risk of legal regulations, that we cover supply chain risk and whatever. So that's what I've told one of my clients last week as well. Even if you are a small company, be prepared that probably in 5 years you will have your own lawyer sitting in procurement, protecting your ass. Sorry for the word, because you will need to have it. It's getting so complicated that you will need to have trained resources to deal with it.
Excellent insights. Now, I'm curious about picking your brain a little bit on what you think is kind of the here and now, the most important items of procurement in 2025 and maybe also beyond. So, in one sentence, I'm curious to hear, what is your definition of a modern procurement leader in 2025?
Yeah, good question. A modern procurement leader embraces technology and understand that he needs to connect people and technology to be really successful. So to create human or to enforce human and digital intelligence, and the procurement leader drives the agility of the organization, drives also the resilience of its organization, and very important, and this is where we still, I think, are pretty weak in procurement, we deliver more than just savings. We deliver a competitive advantage for the organization, which also means that we probably need to embrace new areas that we in the past have never managed. And this is what a procurement leader does. And this is also when we get a C-suite at the table, we always ask for this seat at the C-suite table. We only will get it if we are acting like business leaders and not just procurement managers. And this is something where I see still a lot of room for improvement.
What are some of those new approaches, those new items that you think procurement needs to take on if they want to truly be able to be that value driver, the function that is creating a competitive advantage for the business? Is there things that you see that procurement, broadly speaking, as a function in organizations needs to improve upon?
Let me provide you a short example. I worked for a
Please.
large agricultural machine manufacturer in the US many years ago. And there was a time when we started to collaborate also with startups to deliver new farm technologies, smart technologies for farming. But who built these relationships? It was mainly engineering. So engineering was talking to people outside the organization to build a joint venture or to build a joint product or whatever. Procurement was totally out of scope. And I think we are the ones who really manage relationships. We are the one who can establish relationships. And I think that's a space where we need to get into in the near future, because it's pretty obvious that we more and more will have new ecosystems connecting our organization with startup firms, with technology providers, with outside innovators. And that needs to be our role to manage these groups, teams. We should be the experts in relationship management, performance management, to make sure that these kind of collaborations really turn out to be successful. And this is a new business model for procurement. Yeah. And we need to get stronger.
Yeah, because it's not just about getting like involved early. That's what a lot of people like to talk about. You know, how do we make sure that procurement gets engaged early in the relationship? That's one element of it. But what you're also talking about, which I think is very interesting, is procurement daring to become subject matter experts on particular items so that they also can be able to be at that, in those conversations early, not because they're getting involved, but because they're necessary to be there, and therefore are qualified to be able to manage the relationship and the performance of a vendor, right? Because it's otherwise a very odd situation, right? Almost two different differentiating views. An R&D or engineering, stakeholder works together with a vendor, and then the procurement comes in and is meant to then manage that contract and manage that relationship without being the subject matter expert related back to the area in which the engineer or R&D person is actually working together with that supplier, whether that be on innovation or a project of development, right? There is a little bit of a chasm there in the role. Do you think that procurement professionals moving into roles in 2025 today and moving forward, is there something that they need to be able to try and specialize on? Is there a particular, I would say, subject matter that you think that that procurement people should get stronger on?
I think what we definitely need in procurement is a way stronger focus on data analytics. And I think for that, you really need to have specialists. You can't do that just on top of something else. But if it really comes to the typical procurement function itself, the role of a buyer, the role of a category manager, you need to be a bit more generalist. You really need to understand about market intelligence, market analytics. You need to understand also about how to use technology. You need to be something like a risk manager. You need to have some kind of a financial expertise. You need to be able to negotiate, to manage relationships. So it's more like the generalist. But really, if it comes to technology, if it comes to data, we need some new specialist roles in the organization that helps the generalist to get better. So there will be a new kind of, let's say, team approach in procurement to connect, again, data, machines, and humans to deliver more.
Fantastic insights. Thank you so much. Now, I want to round off with a quick fire round. We could be able to talk all day, but unfortunately, we have to soon go. Jan, quick fire, one word or one sentence answers to the question. You ready to go?
I try to.
All right. Procurement in 2026 will be defined by what?
By a strong approach towards cost, risk, and resilience. I strongly believe it will be a difficult year.
Interesting. Now, away from the professional side of things, on the personal side of things, in Swedish, we have a saying called paradrätt. It means kind of the dish that you will always be able to dazzle with if somebody comes over to dinner. If I was coming over to dinner and you were making a paradrätt, what would that be, Jan?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think something with meat. So probably a steak with some nice potatoes and some grilled vegetables.
Sounds delicious. I will be over next week. And the last item, do you have any book or podcast that you're listening to or returning to often that you would like to be able to tip to our listeners, whether it's professional or personal?
Not really. To be honest, I try to avoid podcasts because I anyway deal 24/7 with business and with procurement. So I'm not going to listen to podcasts. Sometimes I do an exception, like listening to yours and one or two others, of course. No, I know it's a German one, but I think no one from the audience will listen to it. It's two comedians. One is pretty sarcastic, and that's what I like. So no recommendation for that. I have not.
No worries. Not a fan of podcasts, but you are a fan of being on them, and we're a fan of having you on as well. Thank you so much for today, Jan Theissen. Jan, if people want to be able to get in touch with you or learn more about yourself or what you guys are doing at Target P, what's the best way to do so?
The best way to go to our website, which is called www.targetp.de or www.targetp-us.com. You will find all the information about Target P. Or join me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, first name, last name, and I will be happy to talk to you, and I will usually respond quickly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for responding to our questions today on today's episode of The Way We Source. A pleasure having you on.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thanks for having me.